South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham for more on this. The president, Senator, was HOT this morning as he departed the White House for NATO. Let's just remind people of just how hot he was. Listen here.
As soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
So what did you make of what you heard the president say earlier today?
I can understand his frustration, but there's no moral equivalency between Iran and Israel. Iran wants to kill all the Jews, and Israel is saying no, not this time around. So Iran is a fanatical religious Nazi regime. Israel is a democracy aligned with the United States, shared values, shared enemies. Israel is our friend. Iran is our enemy. I am glad we've got a ceasefire. I want to praise President Trump and his team for Operation Midnight Hammer. If you don't give him credit and the military credit, that is a problem for you. They deserve credit. This operation was flawless. It was effective more than anything else. It did obliterate these three sites. The pilots did a fantastic job, but so did President Trump, making a bold decision. As to the ceasefire, it's a good thing if it leads to peace. It will be a step backward if it leads to the ability of Iran to rearm and retool. And the head atomic scientist in Iran, the one who's still alive, said they're going right back to enrichment. So I'm not so sure we've solved the problem yet.
So, Senator, I'm trying to say, would I characterize you as optimistic in this moment?
I will not be optimistic until I hear the Iranian regime say publicly, we recognize Israel's right to exist as a nation and the Jewish people's right to live in peace with the rest of the region. When they say that, I will have a sense of optimism I don't have today. President Trump said a ceasefire will allow Iran and the region to live in peace and harmony. There can be no peace between Iran and Israel until Iran decides to change their policy, which is the regime policy of destroying the state of Israel and killing all the Jews. Until that changes, nothing really changes. The program has been decimated, but the people who are in charge will come right back at Israel. So I'm looking for regime change in this sense, for Iran to abandon its desire to destroy Israel, to recognize Israel's right to exist as a nation. That, to me, is not too much to ask of the Iranians.
Well, I mean, if you take a look at the history of the last 46 years, it might be too much to ask the theocracy that runs the country with the help of the IRGC.
Well, let's change. Well, yeah, let's change the theocracy then.
Well, that's the question. Are you up for getting rid of the entire thing? And if so, what fills the vacuum in its place? Because as we've seen in some places in the world, when there's a power vacuum, it doesn't turn out very well.
Sure. Well, number one, I'm not advocating us invading Iran to take down the regime. I don't see American boots on the ground. What I am advocating is for Israel not to be required to go into a room of fanatical religious Nazis and negotiate with them, and no matter what they do, the people across the table are going to kill them anyway. That's not fair to the people of Israel. That's not fair to the world at large. So regime change can come in a couple of ways. You can replace the people with folks in Iran who don't want to kill all the Jews, which I think are most people, or you can get the regime to change its behavior. Until the regime recognizes Israel's right to exist, this problem doesn't go away. So to me, a prerequisite to any negotiations after the ceasefire should be acknowledgement by Iran that they've abandoned their policy of destroying the state of Israel. They're now willing to live with Israel. They can have grievances against Israel. They can have concerns about Israel policy, but they have to abandon the goal of killing all the Jews in Israel. If they're not willing to do that, that tells you all you need to know about the ceasefire.
Okay, so we're looking at arrivals there in Netherlands. Obviously, The French president, Emmanuel Macron, is arriving.
Looking
not
good.
Not a punch thrown yet.
Yes.
So what do you expect?
My money's on his wife, by the way.
What do you expect to come from this summit?
I hope we have solidarity with NATO. To President Trump, congratulations on getting NATO to do something nobody else could do. They're going to 5% GDP on defense. It's going to be billions of dollars NATO contributes to the common need, the common defense. This is a major accomplishment by President Trump. Operation Midnight Hammer was one of the greatest operations in the history of the country. The only reason we're talking about a ceasefire is because of Donald Trump. The only reason that people are giving more to NATO is because of Donald Trump. I'm hoping that we will have a joint understanding that until Russia comes to the peace table, we're going to be harder on Putin, not easier. So President Trump said something pretty telling. You know, Vladimir, my problem is not you helping Iran. My problem is you. So, Mr. President, I have 85 senators, Republican and Democrats, that will send you a bill to allow you to put tariffs on countries that buy Russian oil up to 500%, with a waiver if you like, to get Putin to the table. If China and India stop buying Russian oil, then his war machine, Putin, would come to a grind and would get him to the table. So my goal is to help President Trump get Putin to the table by giving him leverage of a sanctions bill and a tariffs bill that will do the job. So that is coming to President Trump soon.
All right. Well, we will look forward to all of that and more ahead. Senator, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.